Okay, good evening,
Oh, there.
everyone. Welcome to Trolling with Logic. It's 7 p.m. here on the 5th of April 2014, 7 p.m. here in the UK and 2 p.m. Eastern Time over in the States. Like I said, we're glad to be back. It's been a little bit of a break. Last week, Patrick Lindenfors, am I pronouncing that right, Marty?
No.
Okay, well, so, I'll get it one day. No, but last week, Patrick, I had to cancel at the very last minute, but we rearranged with him. He'll be back, and in early May, we'll be able to speak to him. So, and also the Madness Mayhem charity event was going on at the same time, so we decided not to do a show, just let them have their moment and, raise their money. So just to all the usual announcements, we're on every week, live shows, on secularism, skepticism, and all that good stuff. Just to remind everyone, you can call in at any time. As you can see, scrolling along the bottom of the screen, add the Skype contact Trolling with Logic. Send me a PM and we'll add you into the call in due course. Like I say, do not call the show because it'll just distract us in the middle of speaking to our guest. And also, when you do call in, you grant us permission to use your likeness as the show is recorded and then later uploaded onto YouTube and iTunes. And also, the recording of this show, it's public domain, so please feel free to share it any way you want, just as long as you link back to us as a common courtesy. So I'll introduce the panel, and as always, welcoming back Marty. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
And how do you say his name exactly?
Patrick Lindenfors.
Okay. There you go. That's
the RS is pronounced like SH.
Yep. There you go. So if you need your IKEA instructions translated, Marty's in hand. And welcoming back.
There's nothing to translate. They are just pictures.
but we still can't understand those instructions.
Yeah,
they never
the pictures are in Swedish, yeah.
Yeah. And welcoming back after what seems forever, Sheila, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, and I'm glad to be back. And yes, it does feel like forever.
Okay.
Way too long.
So I'll let you, you've been looking forward to this so much, so I'll let you introduce and then you'll roll into the introductory questions because we know you've been looking forward to this quite a lot since we knew we were going to have him on.
Yes, I have been. Thank you very much. Our guest this week is Dale McGowan. He is the author of Parenting Beyond Belief. I guess we'll go ahead and start out with some introductory questions. You're a secularist now. Have you always been so?
Well, I was certainly never a traditional believer. When I was a kid, we went to church every Sunday and did that sort of thing, but it was not heavy-handed. It was a very light, sort of nominal Christian upbringing. Certainly by the time I was about 16 years old, I was identifying as an atheist and eventually discovered secular humanist as a label that I ended up preferring.
Excellent. I did a little bit of looking around your website. You got married in a Christian wedding, is that correct?
Oh gosh, yes. Very Christian. I called it the Protestant quadfecta. We had 4 different Protestant denominations represented between the 2 ministers and the organist and the church. It was Lutheran, Episcopalian, Baptist, and Methodist. So yeah, it was about as religious as it gets.
Okay. Well, how did you kind of just give us a sort of an abridged version of how you got to what you're doing now with the secular parenting and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it was, as I said, I've been an atheist and a humanist for pretty much always. But it wasn't a major part of my life until I'd say in my 30s, something like that. I began looking into it more, learning a little more of the history about it and so on. At the time, I was a professor at a Catholic college in Minnesota, and I began sort of challenging some of the college's positions on the open exchange of ideas and that sort of thing. And one thing led to another, and I eventually resigned and decided that I wanted to write full-time. And I saw an opportunity in secularism, specifically in secular parenting. There had been nothing comprehensive written for secular parents and on the specific issues that arise when you raise your kids without religion. And so I wanted to begin my writing career with something that was really, unique and needed. But it was difficult to find a publisher. Not because of the controversy around the topic, but because they were convinced there was no audience for it. I showed them the demographics, I showed the census data and so on, and but they always said, well, if there was an audience for it, there would already be books for it. And since there are no books for it, we're not going to publish any books for it. And it's a circular thing. So finally, found an agent, found a publisher, and the books have done very, very well. Was received by an eager audience, and that things have continued from there. I've built my career around first the parenting, and then subsequently other secular topics.
You certainly got quite a few really great contributors to it, specifically to your books. Can you kind of walk me through, reaching out and contacting people and getting them to kind of contribute to it, I guess?
Right. Yeah, Parenting Beyond Belief has 27 contributors. It's a collection of essays, essentially, to open up the topic. And I wanted to have some everyday parents. I wanted to have educators, psychologists, sort of a range of people. But I knew that it would, one of the things that would help me land both an audience and a publisher in the first place would be to have some of the prominent names in the movement. And so I contacted Julia Sweeney through her website, the comedian. And she's just brilliant and funny and very relaxed in her approach. It's a very personal approach. It's wonderful. And I thought that would be perfect to start the book out with an essay by Julia. So I contacted her through her website, told her about the project. She said yes in 90 minutes. 90 minutes later, I had an email from her saying absolutely. So then I started contacting more people that I knew, filling in. I had 9 topic areas in mind, filling in various areas. And then eventually, with difficulty, got a hold of Richard Dawkins. And what I wanted to do with Dawkins' work, I knew that he's got too much going on to write a new piece, but he had a wonderful letter to his daughter that he wrote, gosh, at this point, it's probably 20 years ago or something, 15, 20 years ago, in which he spells out his values and the reason that he feels that evidence is the right way to go in forming your beliefs. She was 10 years old at the time when he wrote the letter. And so I asked him for permission to reprint that letter in the book, and he granted permission, which was very nice. And of course, once we had Julia and Richard on board, nobody said no anymore. So we ended up having just the range of contributors I wanted. Everyone from very aggressive atheists like Penn Jillette, all the way to a couple of UU ministers, Unitarian Universalist ministers, who contributed to the book as well. And I think it ended up being the range of voices and opinions that I really wanted. I think it's a much stronger book for that.
Was there anybody that you really wanted that just frankly turned you down, or that you weren't able to contact?
There were a couple that, gosh, it's been so long now. I'm trying to remember who it was, but there were a few people who had too much going on. There were a couple that I couldn't get in touch with, but really, I would say 90% of the people that I asked said yes, jumped right aboard.
Well, let's see. I had something else right off the bat. Is your wife fairly religious? I mean, do you guys? I know you said that you had a lot of different religions represented in your wedding. Is that because she's? And it kind of ties into, I guess, the book that you're currently working on, or did you finish it already? Or the secular religious mixed marriages. Are you still working on that one?
Yeah, that one is done. It's actually in the galley phase right now, so it's going to be published in August. My wife was religious when we were married. She was a Southern Baptist when we met and when we married, and the reason for the mix in the wedding is that her uncle was a Baptist minister. They also had a family friend who was a Methodist minister who they wanted to participate. The church we chose, they didn't actually have a home church at that time. And so we chose an incredibly beautiful century-old Lutheran church in downtown San Francisco. So there's the Lutheran, and we had an organist from Grace Episcopal Cathedral in San Francisco, simply because he was a spectacular organist. So yes, she was religious when we were married, and for the first 13 years of our marriage. In 2005, she at that point had been reading and thinking about things for a couple of years, and she decided that she was an atheist.
Did you guys have any sort of disagreements early on when it came to how to raise your kids? When it came to what to teach them and what not to?
Yeah, very little. We really had very little friction. This is one of the things I talk about in this most recent book. Our values were very much the same, and this is something that comes as a surprise to people, that it's possible for somebody to be a Southern Baptist and share a tremendous amount of values with someone who's an atheist. But what it boiled down to, and this is true for a lot of people, she believed in God. She believed that Jesus was his son and our Savior. She believed that he will come again, and that was about it. Everything else, she was pro-choice. She was in favor of gay rights. She was in favor of gun control, opposed to capital punishment. I mean, all of the values that are most important kind of in our daily life, we shared. It was just these sort of theological values that she inherited that ended up being, oh, now the dog is going to go off, that ended up being the difference. And then she just eventually in 2005 decided that she didn't believe those things either. So it really ended up being relatively little friction, because it's the values difference more than the beliefs that ends up being most of the problem.
Right. We have a question already from our audience. How often are you confronted pertaining to your authorship, considering that you live in Georgia, that you live in the South?
That's also relatively little. One of the things that's interesting, we live in the Atlanta area, and cities in the South, especially in the last generation or so, 15 to 20 years, have rapidly diversified. So we're in an area that about 20 years ago would have been 100% white Republican Baptist. I mean, very close to 100%. And now, for example, Atlanta had a large job boom for about 10 to 15 years, and people came from all over the world to work for tech companies here and other Fortune 500 companies. And so we have people from all over the United States, a lot of people from South Asia, Southeast Asia, from Europe. So it's a very diverse area, which means you immediately also get religious diversity. And as soon as people are in touch with that kind of diversity on a daily basis, a lot of the poison goes away, a lot of the difficulty goes away. So I have had so little issue from people for the work I do. And I think that would have been quite different a generation ago.
How about your kids, attending school in the South? Do they have any sort of issues or difficulties? I know you talked some about, like in the little pre-show that we had, your daughter and her crucifix and stuff. Has she had any sort of issues, like with other students or teachers or anything? Has she had real problems with that?
Yeah, once in a while, nothing serious, nothing major. But one of the things that, and each of my kids has a different kind of engagement with it. My two oldest weren't terribly interested in talking about religion or irreligion or anything like that when they were younger in school. They became more interested in high school. But my youngest, from the time she was in preschool, literally, she was engaging like Voltaire. I mean, she would want to talk to the other kids about what they believed and what she believed and, what happens after you die and all this. I'm serious. At age 4, she was doing this. And so she quickly learned that what kids tend to do is typical conversation. The kid says, "Where do you go to church?" "Well, we don't go to church." "Well, but do you believe in God?" "No, I really don't believe in God, but I'm still thinking about it." That's what she would always say. And the other kid kind of goes, "Bah, you have to believe in God. How could you not believe in God?" And they sort of freak out a little bit. But this lasts for about a minute, typically. And if you just sort of go, "Yeah, well, there it is. People are different," the kids will tend to move on, and 5 minutes later, they're playing together. What frequently happens is the parents insert themselves into it too early, and they kind of freak out about, "Oh no, this is, my kid's being bullied or something." Most often, the kids will actually move on if you let them. They'll have the little freak out, and then so my youngest, Delaney, began to know this was coming. She'd sort of have the conversation, say, "Do you go to church?" "Nope." "Well, do you believe in God?" "Nope." And they go, "Oh," they do a little freak out, and then they have this great conversation. And here she's meeting Christian kids, Hindu kids, Islamic kids, and so on, and really engaging it and enjoying it. But one of the things that my son, for example, has noticed, he talked about the fact that at his high school, in his group of friends, he has a really significant number of friends who are atheists and agnostics. And he said, virtually all of their parents are religious. So there's a generational difference that's going on as well, even in the South, in the cities, where you're starting to get a much more secular self-identity among kids coming up than the parents' generation. Now, go 20 minutes away from here into rural Georgia, and it's another planet. It's a really very different. So now, instead of a north-south split so much in the United States, I think it's really becoming an urban-rural split, much more so.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I've been in several places around the country, and I find that to be absolutely true. It's becoming more widely accepted and more, I guess, liberal, for lack of a better word, in the bigger cities. But when you get into areas where there's less contact with other types of people, they're just kind of staying, a generation or two behind everybody else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a shame. Well, it's good that that your kids are doing so well with it. It's amazing. I've got, like I was telling you before, I've got 3 kids, and their father's side is all fairly religious. They attend church regularly, at least once a week, some of them 2 or 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. They have big revivals, like every 3 years. It rotates between Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois for the family reunions, and they have bandstands, and everybody sings. And
wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But despite all that, we just left. I was allowed to make my own decisions. My mother's agnostic, and my father was raised Catholic, but they pretty much just left it to me to decide.
Nice.
And that's kind of what I did with my kids. Now, my parents sent me to a couple of different churches and let me test it out. I didn't do that with my kids. If they wanted to go, they had friends who were going to church or something, then I let them go along.
Yeah.
I a number of times my children said, well, so-and-so wants me to go to church with them on Sunday. Is that cool? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I think it's extremely important, even if kids don't go to church, I think it's important for them to be exposed to various religions so that they can at least understand that there are different types of people and different belief systems out there.
Yeah, and I think one of the other nice things that avoids is creating a forbidden fruit. If kids get the idea that mom and dad are kind of afraid of religion, then they think, ooh, that must be some very powerful stuff going on behind those doors. And it can become an appealing sort of, place to go to solve whatever life problems you run into as a teenager or something like that. So I'd much rather sort of open those doors, say, here it is. You get to see what that is. You can see what another one is. You can make up your own mind. And kids who have that exposure tend to make good choices.
Yeah. Well, I think that could be said of just about anything across the board. The quickest way to get a kid to want to do something is to tell them not to do it.
Oh yeah.
So if you open it up to them and explain to them, what exactly it is, and let them kind of explore things to a certain degree, I think it allows them a much healthier expansion and gives them a broader base when they're growing up.
Oh, exactly. And they should also always know where you're coming from. Every once in a while I run into a parent who lets their kids explore different ideas, but they haven't even told their kids what they believe themselves, partly because they're so concerned about indoctrinating in the opposite direction. And I respect the concern, but it really is never a good idea for a parent to hide their values from their kids. You want to let them know what it is that you believe, but at the same time, make sure that you follow it up. And I always did this. My kids would ask some question that relates to religion. I'd say, here's what some people believe, here's what I believe. And in the end, you get to make up your own mind. You can change your mind 1,000 times if you want, and I will love you no less based on what you decide.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And, I've always told my kids the same thing. You can believe whatever you want. Just make sure that you're believing it for the right reasons, that you actually come to these conclusions on your own.
Right.
So, yeah, absolutely.
And I think Marty's got some questions here, so we'll bring you in, Marty.
Well, yeah,
kind of have one question, and this is, I realize that to Americans especially, this might sound extremely strange, but as I said before the show, I live in Sweden, and here, I mean, parenting without religion sounds like, well, how would you parent with religion? It's like, can you explain the differences? Like, how, like, basically, why is this book needed, really? I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it is really a matter of context entirely. I understand what you're saying. Phil Zuckerman, I think, is the name of a sociologist who recently wrote the book Society Without God. And it's all about the Scandinavian context in which people are living, and atheism isn't even so much a thing in the same way, because it's this
Exactly.
It's the accepted norm.
Yeah, I'm looked at as kind of weird when I say that I'm an outspoken atheist, because
Exactly.
I mean, what's there to be outspoken about, basically? And
Exactly, right. And one of the things that he mentioned as well is that religion is considered to be something that's not even talked about so much. It's a personal thing. It's not something that people get up on a soapbox about. And so, and boy, you know, if religion was like that, it would really not be an issue that you need to push. But in the American context, in the United States, because it's not only the norm, but it's also the understood default. Everyone will assume that you are religious unless you specifically say otherwise. Then a certain form of religion starts to push itself into the public square. And it's usually a certain form of aggressive Protestant evangelical religion. And you start getting the town council that wants to start its meeting with a prayer. And it will be a very specific Jesus-based prayer, not a non-denominational prayer. And then you start to get, you know, the president, well, all the presidents close their speeches with God bless America and all this stuff. The president saying that God told him to invade Iraq, you know, and there's just, you start to get the sense that it is so pervasive that you don't want to collapse into the default. You don't want to disappear into the default. In terms of parenting, religious parents get a number of advantages from being in religious communities. They have, first of all, a community. They have a set of people who care for them and you know, who they can communicate with and who have shared values. They have readily available answers to the big questions. They have an easy way to talk about death. They have a charitable giving program that is you know, already ready for them. So there are all sorts of things that parents actually benefit from. The main thing they benefit from is confidence. If you are a religious parent, you've got 100 generations of religious parents behind you, all nodding their heads in approval of your decision. You've got the creator of the universe approving of your decisions, you know, the way you're raising your children. And he's got a book that says that you're doing fine.
That also says that you should kick the shit out of your kids if they misbehave.
And it's an act of love, right?
Yeah.
But exactly. But for non-religious parents, I wanted to give parents the same sense of community and the same sense of confidence without all the bad. So I wanted them to feel that there is a community of secular parents out there who are also trying various things, you know, who are also, you know, none of us are experts at parenting, even those of us who write books about it. You know, kind of give people a sense that they're not alone. I said, honestly, Parenting Beyond Belief could have been a front cover, a single page, and a back cover that just said, you are not alone. And it would have served half its purpose, simply letting people know that. Because I honestly got emails from people in the first year the book was out that they saw the book, and this one woman said she just burst into tears when she saw the book because she said, I'm not the only one. And that's got to sound strange in your context, but you know, she honestly thought that she was the only person in the United States of America raising her children without religion. And it is actually possible to feel that in in this context. And we wanted to break through that and say, no, there are a lot of people doing this. You're not doing the wrong thing for your kids. You're actually doing the right thing. You're doing a really wonderful thing for them by opening up the world to them, by allowing them to think for themselves, make their own decisions, to base your parenting in research and reason. So that was the purpose of the book. It's to take all those various advantages that religious parents have and find secular ways to achieve exactly the same things.
Great.
So there's one question that came up in the chat room there, and I think they're playing devil's advocate. And this, I think is this quite a common thing that you must get, is how can you teach your kids right from wrong without religion? Do you get that a lot?
Oh yeah, it's a common question.
Yeah.
The fact is, I have had religious parents talk to me, for example, about that. Friends of mine who are religious, who have said, how can you help your kids learn to be good? And one time I remember I said, well, why is it so important to be good? And she said, why is it important? And then she gave me about 10 reasons that it's important to be good. You know, that society would fall apart, and you know, you would constantly have to be looking over your shoulder at the people that you've harmed, and you know, how you couldn't trust people, and those are reasons for people to behave ethically. So I've never been stumped for giving my kids reasons to do the right thing. I have never been in a position where I had to say, I don't know, it just seems right. You can always say, well, how would you feel if someone else treated you that way? You know, the old golden rule idea that shows up in every philosophical and religious system in the world is a perfectly good way to explain ethics and morality to your kids. You should treat other people as you want to be treated.
I'd like to jump in here and say I absolutely loved what you just said about, you know, what asking the religious person for reasons why you should be good. I guess, well, except for the whole going to heaven and avoiding hell thing, that there are actually good reasons. That's brilliant, because I'm in a conversation in a comment section right now where this guy just, you don't believe in God, so morality is relative. So you believe that if someone thinks that raping kids is fine, then it is fine, and blah, blah, blah. And what you just said was gold, I gotta say.
Yeah. Oh, good. Good. That's, yeah, and I found it very effective. Most of the religious parents I know, and I know a lot of them, parent from the same place that I do. They do actually give their kids reasons for it. I rarely hear people say, well, you have to do such and such because it's in the Bible. I don't know. I don't have anything else. It's just in the Bible. They don't actually do that. They actually do give reasons. And then they might also say, and God wants you to be this way, or you know, something like that. So it's really just a matter of helping them to recognize that I'm using the same thing that they are, and I'm just not adding the imprimatur of the creator of the universe.
Okay, good. There's chat room questions. So go on, Marty. You've been the quietest, so you get to do the chat room questions.
Okay, let's see. What about divorced couples where one side is religious and the other is not? I feel like I'm in a tug of war, someone says.
Yeah, that's difficult. The book I just finished on secular religious marriages, that's one of the most difficult issues. When a couple is married, there's a need to come to agreement on a lot of things. You have to do this if you're living in the same house and raising kids together. But once there's a divorce, all bets are off. You don't have the same requirement to accommodate each other. And frequently parents can just go off and, you know, really, especially if it was a difficult divorce, if it was a very contentious divorce, parents can go off in very different directions. One of the things that experts on relationships and divorce say just unanimously is that children in a relationship benefit from parents who try to keep the rules as much the same in their divorce situation as they were in their marriage. They try to keep the ground rules very much the same for the kids. If you suddenly create an entirely new family dynamic, obviously there are going to be differences, but everything you can do to keep your old agreements in place is going to benefit the kids. And if you had an agreement that, for example, the parents were able to own their own religious perspectives and the children were exposed to both, then that should also be the agreement in the divorce situation. It's best for the kids to actually be in a situation where one parent is not alienated from them by the other. So it's largely a matter of making sure that both parents understand what the best practices are for a good divorce. And that sounds like an oxymoron to a lot of people, but one of the most prominent divorce experts that I read, her name is escaping me right now, but she wrote a book called The Good Divorce, in which she said roughly half of all divorces are actually good divorces, in which even though the marriage split up, the parents are still able to come to reasonable agreement on the important things, especially for the kids. And if you are in that situation, this is a reasonable expectation that you say, we still get to have both have influence on the kids, and neither one should be demonizing the other parent. And if that's the situation, the children should still be in a position of making their own choices and not being driven away from one parent or the other. But it's very difficult. It's a very complicated situation.
Okay, and there's another chat room question, Marty.
Yeah, are you familiar with, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Stefan Molyneux?
Oh, so that name is familiar.
Yeah, something. Are you familiar with his parenting? That's the question. I've never heard of him.
I don't think I'm familiar in detail, but I know the name. Canadian, maybe. Anyway, I'm not familiar with the details. Does the questioner want to?
No, that's just it.
Tell me in.
Ask
Okay.
Dale if he's familiar with his parenting.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, there was another question. Like the first time we had this show scheduled, and it was something that seemed to come up once or twice. Was even secular people's, and I don't know how often, but is it? Why would you need a book about parenting? What's the point of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, shouldn't you just know how to do this stuff? So, I mean, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a funny one to me. I've always thought that was a really funny. I've seen some people who react very strongly against the whole idea of a parenting book at all, and that you ought to know how to do these things. I didn't know how to do any of these things. I was a complete novice as a parent. I hadn't so much as changed a diaper when my son was born. I've changed a lot of them now. But I think it's always worthwhile to gather opinions when you're doing a complex thing. And there's nothing I've done that's as complicated as parenting. So this particular set of books is gathering together advice and various approaches, resources, activities, and so on for non-religious parenting specifically. You know, how can you do these specific things that religious parents have, you know, an easy way to do? How can you do these outside of a religious context? And if somebody doesn't see value in that, that's fine. That's all right. But an awful lot of people like the idea of gathering opinions from others who have been in the same situation, whatever it is. And a lot of people have said, wow, just to hear other non-religious parents talking about how they approached talking about death, for example, or how they approach discipline. Those are very interesting questions, and you don't have to do automatically what somebody else says, but it's always been good to me to hear the opinions of somebody else who's been through it.
Okay, we'll go back to Sheila.
Yeah, actually, that kind of brings me to the next thing that I wanted to hear your opinion on. There's been a lot of people, especially in the media lately, that are kind of following this spare the rod sort of parenting, you know, where there's been a couple of books that were written by some fairly extremist parents who are, to put it bluntly, just telling you to carry around a piece of PVC to beat your kids when they're, you know, if they're acting out in a store or that sort of thing. And it's now even coming to where this is resulting in, you know, children dying at the hands of their own parents. What is your opinion on this? Have you been following this at all?
Oh, yeah. This is, and one of the reasons it's relevant for my work is that the great majority of corporal punishment advocates I hear are coming from a religious perspective. It's frequently that biblical perspective, plus just the idea that children are going to tend toward evil. You know, that's what's at the root of that sort of fundamentalist religious idea, and that you have to bludgeon that out of them. The fact is, moral development research now is showing that there's a much stronger case to be made that our tendency is actually pro-social. And if you put children in a supportive and pro-social environment, they will tend toward ethical behavior and ethical development. It's not a case of actually beating the bad out of them. One of the great advantages that a non-religious parent has is we don't have to even think about what the Bible says. We don't even have to take it into account. We can simply look at the research. What does the research tell us about corporal punishment? And fortunately, there's tremendous research that's been done in this. There's a researcher named Elizabeth Gershoff who did a meta-analysis of 88 corporal punishment studies, and she identified 11 outcomes of corporal punishment and things that result from consistent corporal punishment. And 10 of the 11 were negative. You will have a child who tends to be more withdrawn, more antisocial, more aggressive as they get older, more likely to beat their own children, more prone to depression. There are all sorts of bad things. There was one positive result that comes from corporal punishment, and that was immediate compliance. Getting the child to do what you want in that moment. If you whack them, they'll do what you want. Oh, and they will also tend to be more aggressive, more depressed, and all sorts of other things. So, and the nice thing is, we actually have a large number of other tools in the toolbox. We don't have to get immediate compliance by beating the child. You know, one of the things that I always thought was strange is I had somebody argue, I've heard several times people argue, well, what if the child is in danger and they're about to run into the street? I think, and you whack them? You know, you can grab their arm, you can restrain them, you can hold them back. I don't understand, you know, whacking them to keep them from going into the street. So it gets a little silly. And I think it really just comes down to the basic understanding of human tendency. And we know from the research now that a child is actually going to tend toward pro-social behavior if you allow it and if you nurture that. We don't actually have to beat the demon out of them. And if we do that, there are all sorts of these other negative outcomes that correlate with it. So corporal punishment is the jury is in on corporal punishment. It is not the way to go.
Right. Okay, before I kind of change directions here, we got a couple more questions from the audience. Dale has suggested, do not be against religion with your kids as they will likely rebel. To what degree should parents silence their own beliefs towards religion?
So I said before that it's important to own your values and let your kids know what you believe, but the implication of the question is the extent and the degree of my opposition to religion. How much do I let my kids know that? And that's a very good question, because one of the things that I was concerned about from the beginning was having undue influence over them. I really want them to have their own, to find their own way. I think it's the only honest and respectful way to protect their autonomy, to make those choices. It's one of the things that I love the most in my own worldview, is that I came to it myself. You know, I actually worked it out myself, and it means a lot to me that way. So I want to protect that for my kids. As a result, I knew that as a parent, I was going to have an oversized influence on them when they were young. You know, whatever mom and dad say is going to carry a lot of extra weight. So I tempered they always knew from the very beginning that dad didn't believe in God. But I tempered some of the strength of my critiques when they were very young, simply because I didn't want to overly influence them. I tried to be very even-handed. Doesn't mean that I completely hid it from them, but I did try to temper it. And then as they got older, and I felt that they really had their feet under them in terms of their own critical thinking and independence, I was able to share more and more of, and now they are 18, 16, and 12, and they know. They know the full extent of how I feel and why. And they also know every single time we have this conversation, I underline the fact that in the end, the decision is theirs. And I would really be sad and upset if I knew that they ended up choosing the same opinions that I have only because they were my opinions. That I really would much rather they differed from me on their own than line up with me just because it's my opinion. So I think tempering it a little bit when they're young, not to be dishonest, but to protect their autonomy, is a perfectly valid way to go.
Right. It's just as easy to indoctrinate atheism as it is for any religion. If
It
you just
certainly is, yeah.
pound in whatever your belief is, it's not going to be any better for your child than if you were pounding in Christianity or anything else, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Considering American politics has a religious slant, do you find it hard to broach the subject of atheistic parenting hard on the grand scale?
Related to politics, I've never actually found it too difficult on any scale. I mean, I've done, radio shows and talk to reporters and all that sort of thing. There's a lot of surprise, sort of like what I described with my daughter.
Right.
When she would first say that we don't go to church, and the kids go, "Oh my gosh!" It's the same thing sometimes when I'm talking to a radio show or something. Every once in a while, I'll get a conservative host, and he'll say, "Oh, how do you raise your kids without the Bible?" And and I start to describe it, and there's a little bit of a freak out, but it's new information to them. It's frequently just new. And sometimes it takes people a little while to wrap their heads around it. And then the tendency is that we have a really good conversation after that. If I keep my level head, if I can kind of just say, yeah, it's really not that difficult. Here's how you do it. You simply provide reasons. Even when you tell your kids that bedtime's at 9 o'clock, you don't say because I said so. Because then they don't understand that there are reasons for rules, and you want them to be able to develop their own reasons. So, you start to explain things in that way, and people are typically receptive. They will frequently not agree at all. They'll still think that you're missing a huge piece. But I haven't found it difficult to broach the subject. I've never found it necessary to hide the subject or to beat around the bush on that scale.
Excellent. Cal, are you about to add somebody into the call, or can I kind of change direction a little bit?
Keep going. I'm just adding them into them, speaking to them right now to make sure they're ready. So carry
Okay.
on. Yeah. Go with this question. Hopefully we'll have the caller sorted out then.
Okay. Actually, I kind of wanted to talk about your philanthropy a little bit. Can you kind of you kind of working with this Foundation Beyond Belief organization? How did you get started with that?
Well, I started Foundation Beyond Belief in 2009. I had come across the claim that religious people are more generous, that they are more likely to contribute to charity and so on. And in terms of actual dollars, this is actually pretty well established that churchgoers, notice that it's framed in terms of churchgoers. Churchgoers are between 2 and 3 times as likely, they give 2 to 3 times as much of their discretionary income to charitable causes as non-churchgoers. And Arthur Brooks is a conservative commentator who said that this is evidence of a gap in virtue, that the churchgoers are more virtuous. And I just thought that was the oddest conclusion, because if you think about it really for 2 minutes, if somebody is a churchgoer, they have an opportunity 52 times a year to sit in a room, to be inspired by a talk, and then a plate is passed, and they are invited to contribute or not contribute to the less fortunate, to the need in the world, and so on. And a lot of the money will not be spent for that, but it's still the point that the individual is being asked to contribute to make the world a better place. So they have 52 opportunities a year to directly do that. If you're not a churchgoer, you will come across the need once in a while. You will hear of a cause that means a lot to you. You'll contribute. And individuals are every bit as generous if they're not in church. but they're not getting that systematic giving opportunity that you get from the religious community. And so I wanted to create that opportunity for the non-religious. And so I created the foundation. We feature 5 charities per quarter, and members sign up. They go to foundationbeyondbelief.org, and they sign up for a membership. Starts at $5 a month, and then there's a member panel that opens up, and you're able to distribute your donation among the 5 giving categories. There's, poverty category, human rights, and so on. And at the end of the quarter, we take 100% of the money that was designated for each charity and send it to that charity. Over the course of the quarter, we tell the stories of the charity, and we bring their programs to light. So it's really very much not just a passive contribution, but we're really trying to raise the profile of some of these fantastic charities. We typically feature relatively small charities, meaning usually $10 million a year or less, which sounds big, but is actually really, really small. By the time you get to the American Red Cross or something, it's up around $1 billion. So this has been, the idea here was to give people an opportunity to give as a direct expression of their worldview, so that we have secular humanists coming together and supporting charities as an expression of the humanist desire to care for each other. And as of this month, our members have contributed $1.5 million to charities around the world. We have also established volunteer teams, humanist volunteer teams around the United States, 95 teams working in local communities around the United States. And we just last year launched an international service corps. It's called Pathfinders Project, and it's the first year laying the foundation for a global humanist service corps that will launch in 2015. So right now, 3 humanists are traveling around the world, volunteering in 8 different countries over the course of a year. They're actually right now in Guatemala. They started out in
Yeah.
All right.
It's convenient.
Now I'm hearing myself.
I think we're back up. Yay, the sound's back apparently.
Okay.
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Sadly.
All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happens. For some reason, the sound card settings reset to me all of a sudden. So, well, it ended at a good time, so we can introduce Pumpkin properly now. So, introducing Pumpkin.
Oh, hello.
Okay. I believe you had a question for Dale.
Yes. Well, my question was the one that was posted about the politics, but I also have another question of, now I live in Northern Ireland, so I'm in a completely different culture, but the level of religious dogma pushed in schools is equivalent, if not more so, here than it is in the majority of American schools. What do you think would be the best way to combat a religious dogma in a school if the parents have no other choice but to send the child there and they're atheist or agnostic and they don't want their children being indoctrinated into a religion through fear or just general believe this because Jeebus loves you sort of thing?
Right. What's the usual denomination of the schools? Is there a single?
Catholic or Protestant mostly, and generally
Okay.
they hate each other.
Yeah. Well, the thing that works just as well in the American situation, sometimes I have a non-religious parent whose child is going to a religious school, a private school in the United States. Sometimes it's because the local public schools are no good or whatever. But it has everything to do with the foundation that the child is that's established in early childhood. If you establish a critical thinking posture in a child from the time they're very young, give them the idea from the earliest age that there is no question they can't ask, that there is no authority they can't challenge, that anyone who tells them that they can't ask a question is wrong, that foundation is very hard to shake. So you want to, and even if you didn't do that early on and need to sort of make up ground, that's a very strong, empowering message that a parent can give to a child. And just let them know that there's nothing you can't talk about in the home, that you're interested in what they're talking about and learning about in the school. And if a child has two strong voices, the religious voice at school and the secular voice at home, that ends up being just about enough. It's when you lack a second strong voice that a child really gets pulled in a single direction. But if they get the message early on that the choice is theirs, and then they're receiving this strong religious input, and they also have a strong secular input, and they're given the freedom to make their own choice, they tend to do very well. I must say, my kids, we lived in the UK. We lived in England for 6 months in 2004. My kids went to a Church of England school, and the religiosity there was present but leavened. You know, it was a much less dogmatic, scriptural kind of religion. That it was much more service-oriented and social justice-oriented than what we see in the United States. So it must be stronger in Northern Ireland, I'm guessing. One of the things that, that would be a tangent. So anyway, I'm just suggesting that if you give the child the right foundation, you give that second voice coming from the home, you're going to tend to be just fine.
All right, Pumpkin.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nothing else?
Not particularly.
All right. Thanks for calling in then, and we'll speak to you again later.
No problem.
Okay, Sheila Marcus, there is another caller lined up, so I'll get them sorted out.
Yeah, you go ahead. I've asked the only question I had, really. So,
So, well, I know Sheila's got loads up for this one. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. I had a bunch of stuff here. As far as the Foundation Beyond Belief goes, are there projects coming up that people should be looking forward to? I mean, other than becoming members of the foundation or volunteering board. Excuse me. Do you have something else coming up that people should watch out for?
Oh, yes, we do. Well, one of the things we're very excited about is we're having our first national conference in July 18th through 20th. So this is going to be the first free thought conference devoted entirely to giving and volunteering. So it's all about compassionate humanism, how to engage your own community, how to create humanist community, how to increase the humanist profile in the world of philanthropy. We have Actually, we have our keynote speaker is coming in from the UK. We have Carolyn Fiennes, who is the executive director of Global Cool and an organization called Giving Evidence, which is about evidence-based giving. Lots of other prominent humanists and atheists are going to be there. So that's something we definitely want people to know about. It's in Chicago in late July. You can go to humanismatwork.org and get more information about that. We have a ridiculously low registration cost, and it's going to be a great time. We also have a number of other projects going on in addition to the Humanist Service Corps developing that I talked about. We're also building a crisis response program that is, we already have a program when a disaster hits, people are able to donate money. We raised, I think it was $45,000 for the Oklahoma tornadoes, over $60,000 for the typhoon in the Philippines. But people have also expressed an interest in being able to go and volunteer on the ground when a disaster happens domestically. And so we have created a database called Humanist Crisis Responders that people can sign up for. And if they can indicate what their skills are, any particular licenses they have, if they have a medical license, or if they have experience in construction or whatever it is. And then if a disaster hits, we're able to see who is within driving distance of the area, who has the skills that are needed by the organizations that are on site, and we'll be able to activate that database in that way. So that's a very new project that's under development, but you can listen for more developments as that builds.
That's excellent. There's just one more way that, even secular-minded people can be just as giving and helpful as
that's the idea. Yeah.
I think it's wonderful.
Okay, we've got another caller. Max, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, gentlemen and lady?
We're doing grand. So, ask your question to deal with.
Okay. I need to add a little bit of backstory to this. To summarize very shortly, I sort of broke away from religion myself, and I'm really, really proud of that. And as a result, I sort of see religion as a incredibly bad thing, and I understand that I'm quite obsessed and dogmatic about my hatred towards religion and sort of what it did to me, and how I sort of want to stand on a mountain and tell the rest of the world how dumb it is and things like that. But pertaining to kids, I mean, obviously when you're raising a child, eventually the child is going to come to you, even if just sort of, the kid grows up in a secular household, never really hears of God, whatnot. Eventually they're going to come to you and ask, what is this God thing? What do you think is sort of like, a liberal, rational thing to say, instead of going, God's this bullshit concept that most people believe in, right?
Yeah. Well, the approach that we've always taken is, what it amounts to is, they typically will encounter the concept and then talk to you about the specifics. So they've heard from their kids about this sort of from their peers about this sort of thing, and then my feeling has always been, you tell them what it is. This is a thing a lot of people believe. I don't. I've thought about it a lot, and I've decided that I don't believe it's true. And then I always say, but Grandma Barbara, for our kids, it was their grandmother. I know she believes it, so I can tell you what I think, and I'd like you to also go to her and find out what she thinks, and then you get to think about it and make up your own mind and change your mind 1,000 times if you want. So it can just be very initially just a very basic presentation of opinions, but as we got into it further with my kids, I got to say, well, I think what religion is an attempt to understand the world. And before we had science, before there was a methodical way to interrogate reality, it made sense that people with this big human brain had to fill it with something. And so, I mean, the moon disappears during an eclipse. It makes perfect sense to think that a monster ate it, If you have no other way of figuring it out, it makes perfect sense. Now, yes, people should be past that at this point, you would think, but it's sort of been brought forward because not everybody is exposed to science in the form and in the degree that is really effective. So letting them know that it's my opinion that it is a way of understanding the world that I think no longer applies, but that a lot of people still feel that it's emotionally satisfying to think that there's someone who cares for you and that we will go somewhere after we die. I think that's what it's about. It's largely today about psychological comfort. But I will reinforce with them over and over that I want them to decide what they think. And the reason for that is that the strength of my conviction is based on the fact that I got to sort it out for myself. That's why my conviction is so strong. I picture myself standing on a foundation of opinion. And I placed every brick in that foundation. Nobody handed me any finished answers. And so if you ask me why I believe something, I can answer every question. I can tell you the reasons. And if somebody handed me a worldview, whether it's religious or atheistic, and said, here's what's true, and then I'm standing on that platform, well, there are all sorts of holes there. I don't know why it's true. And then if somebody confronts me about it, I'll feel defensive. I don't want my kids to feel that. I want them to be confident. And that's why I want them to place every brick themselves by interrogating the world, talking to people, and figuring out what they believe and building their own foundation.
Great answer. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks.
You got anything else, Max?
I guess not.
Oh, nice. He's away already. Okay, there's some chat room questions, so we'll head back to Marty for them.
Yeah. Quick question, if you don't mind. When I donate to some organizations such as the Red Cross, a large portion of my donation doesn't actually get to the target. Rather, it's usually eaten up by dubious administration fees. Although I realize it's necessary for some costs to go to logistical concern, I'm compelled to ask what percentage of your donations actually reach get to where they're going, I guess. It just cuts off.
Yeah, 100%. We have a what's called a pass-through model. When you donate $1 and designate it for our education charity, $1 goes to the education charity. We are sustained by separate donations. And if someone wants to designate, if they want to say, I'm going to take 10% of my donation and designate it for the foundation, that's terrific. They have the option of doing that. But they also have the option of saying, I want everything to go into human rights. I want everything to go into the natural world, something like that. We are sustained by separate donations and grants in our operations. Every dollar donated to the organizations goes there. And if you donate through PayPal, for example, PayPal takes 2.9% of each donation. We put it right back in. So we actually restore even the 2.9% that PayPal takes out, we put back in from our operations. And that ensures that if you donated $1 outside of the foundation, it would go straight to the charity. We want to be sure that in passing through our foundation, we don't lose the value of the donations at all. 100% is going to go through.
Awesome.
All right, we'll go back to Sheila there. We do have another caller. I'm working to get him on. He's not so familiar with Skype, so hopefully we'll get him on before the end of the show.
Okay.
So there's 25 minutes to go, so carry on, Sheila.
Okay. What would be some of the examples of the charities that you've had kind of spotlighted, in the past?
We have, as I said, we have 5 categories. So one of the categories is education. And we have had education charities working in, we had one called CamFed, which specifically works in countries in Southern Africa, supporting women's education, girls' education. And we have supported an organization called the National Association of Urban Debate Leagues, which creates debate leagues in American cities in under-resourced communities. And they've discovered that debate is something that brings up academic success and makes college attendance much more likely if kids engage in this. So everything in between, from working in Africa to working in American cities. Vidyan Vahini was a charity in India that has a mobile science lab that takes science education to children in rural India that have no exposure whatsoever to modern science education. So we just go looking for these really unique charities in each one of the categories to support. In human rights, it's everything from, we supported LGBT charities for several years, marriage equality charities. Right now we're supporting a project that's studying witchcraft accusations in Ghana, women who are forced out of their communities and put in camps in Ghana, accused of witchcraft. So it's really a very wide range. One of the most interesting categories we have, our fifth category, is called Challenge the Gap. We had a lot of members who were interested in exploring positive religious expressions. And so we find religious charities that do not proselytize and work for the common good and have progressive values. And we feature one of those per quarter as well. The nice thing in our system is that if there's a member who doesn't want to support religious charities, it's very easy to do that in your panel. But those who really like the idea of that outreach have liked this category very much. And we've supported charities in all 5 major world religions, Buddhist Global Relief and a Hindu charity and a Jewish hunger charity and so on. So that's been a really interesting way to give people an opportunity to build those bridges. So it really has been, at this point, 115 charities I think we're up to in the last, going on, well, now it's been 4.5 years.
Wow. Wow. I know there's one I found recently. I believe there was a story about Bill Gates being involved in it that had actually kind of attracted it to my attention. But there's a charity where you can actually like buy a goat and they send it to like a small village, or they also have not just livestock, but they also have these packages where they will teach a woman how to start and maintain her own business. That sort of stuff. And it was founded by a Christian, but he does not use it to proselytize to the, it's not like he's trading it, in exchange for this goat, you have to believe in Jesus or something like that.
Right.
So,
yeah. That's a perfect example. And when our staff goes looking for charities for Challenge the Gap, they estimate that between 75 and 80% of religious charities don't qualify. You look at them and they're specifically tying proselytizing to it. One of them is Samaritan's Purse, for example, is a charity that does a lot of relief work in Africa, but they make it very clear in their materials. They sort of reassure their donors that they're not just giving a bag of rice, they're also giving the good news of Jesus Christ.
right.
And we're not going to support that. That's not what we're looking to support. But
Right.
charities that proselytize tend to not hide it. They actually tend to emphasize it because they consider that to be a draw for their donors.
Right. Right. Well, and I think for the most part, Bill Gates is atheist, so I'm sure
yeah.
that if this was that sort of a charity, that he would have shied away from it. But I loved it because it's not just, giving a village a cow or a goat or something, but they're actually going over and teaching people how to, okay, you've got this cow, now what are you going to do with it? Well, you can either, milk it to feed your family, or you can milk it and then sell milk, or, you're doing these other little projects where you're creating a business out of something that's been given to you, rather than just butchering
exactly.
the cow and eating it or
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. And that's been, our staff does a really wonderful job of looking to see if a charity is following best practices. Are they following the established best practices of this kind of work, which includes building capacity and doing the education piece and not just a Band-Aid. So there's a lot that's known now about what makes for effective philanthropy and what is not effective. And our staff is looking for organizations that have proven best practices in that direction.
Right. Well, okay. What else do you have that you said your book is getting ready to publish now. What else are you working on? Do you have any other projects that you kind of want to shed a little bit of light on?
Well, I just finished up, or I am now finishing the galley review for the marriage book that comes out in August. But aside from that, I am taking the next year and a half, and just focusing on the foundation, trying to build the programs. I'm not going to write any books for a year and a half. I'm completely clearing my schedule. But I am also working with the American Ethical Union which is a network of ethical societies primarily in the Northeast. I'm their new national director of ethical education. So I'm helping them to develop their ethical education program. Essentially, if you're not familiar with ethical culture, it's a movement of, there are about 21 ethical societies around the United States, and it was developed as a philosophical social movement, not a religion. It's not it wasn't developed as a religious denomination. Some people refer to it in religious terms, but it is not based on beliefs. It's based on a shared set of values and a desire to put, as they put it, deed above creed. And they are developing a really terrific alternative to church, essentially, that you have a terrific community for the adults, and then also this ethical education opportunity for the kids that is not based in theistic religion. So that's another thing I'm involved in now.
Wow, that's excellent. I just had a question for you, and it just
okay. I was going to ask, one book we haven't touched on is Atheism For Dummies. What was your kind of, well, were you chosen to do that book, or did you suggest that book? How did that work exactly?
No, the publisher came to me. They went to Hemant Mehta first, the Friendly Atheist blogger, and he recommended me, which I'm very grateful for, because it ended up being the best damn project. It was the most fun I've had in a writing project ever. What they wanted was exactly, I mean, it's the kind of thing you never get to do. They said they wanted it to be light, accessible, fun, but still substantive, just very accessible for the lay reader. And, they wanted it to have humor, to be self-deprecating, sort of poke fun at atheists once in a while, which is a joy. I love doing that. But it was a tremendous amount of research, because it goes through the entire history of atheism and agnosticism. It's a review of all the major works and great figures. And then I go through all the different topics, ethics and morality, and what happens when we die, and parenting and comedy. I have a chapter on comedy, atheist comedy. So it was a lot of fun, and one of the most gratifying responses I've gotten from people is from atheists who have been lifelong atheists. Some of them even, hugely active in the movement, and still said they learned a lot from the book. A lot of things that they didn't know before. So it's really just been a joy. It was just a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
All right. And, well, one thing, and again, this is something, when that book came out, a lot of people said, why, how can you write a dummies book for atheism? Because they thought it would just be one sentence and that would be it.
Yeah. Isn't that a funny thing? Yeah. I had a lot of people say that the sentence would be, atheists don't believe in God. And yeah, my response was, there's an awful lot more to say about atheism than just the definition. Otherwise, if somebody wrote a book about the Grand Canyon, they would say the Grand Canyon is a big hole in Arizona. That's all there is to say. There was much more to say about it than I actually ended up saying. And, I found 300 or so pages worth of rich material. So I always thought that was a funny thing to think, that there was so little to say.
And is writing a dummies book a bit more of a challenge than, say like a standard kind of book?
Well, it was challenging in a way, but it was also easier because they give you a structure. There is a very specific structure to a dummies book. They really know what they're doing. They've written 1,600 dummies books now, which is why I couldn't believe they hadn't gotten to atheism until now. That was weird. But for example, there is a heading on every page. So the first thing you do in writing the book is, I think we had 340 pages or something like that. So you come up with 340 headings. There are 5 major sections, and then chapters within the sections, and then headings within the chapters. So I'd never approached a book in that way, but it really helped. If you organize it and say, here's what I'm going to talk about for a page, and now here's the next thing I'm going to talk about for a page. And then they have formulas for writing the headlines, for each one. You'll notice that almost every heading in a dummies book has an ing word in it. It has a gerund. So learning about such and such, or exploring the such and such, because they like that sort of active feeling of the book. One of the other challenges is they need the reader to be able to jump into the book at any point. They don't want somebody to have to have read from beginning to end. So it's a dip and dive book. But as a result, every once in a while I would say, well, as we saw in the previous chapter, and I'd start talking about something, and the editor would say, no, you got to change that. You cannot build on anything you said already in the book, which is a hell of a challenge. I mean, that's a really interesting thing. But it was just a different kind of writing, and it ended up being a lot of fun. I highly recommend it.
All right, we still haven't got the caller lined up, so Sheila, I'll go back to you.
Okay. Was it easier to write with a sort of an outline already laid out for you, or do you find it kind of easier to just be able to free flow on your own? Can you kind of compare and contrast a little bit to writing your own book as opposed to jumping into their formula?
Yeah, it was easier. It was an easier thing to do, especially when a topic is complicated. I mean, I've written 2 novels too, and that's an entirely different kind of thing. But when I had the next book come up, the one about marriage, I used a lot of the dummies ideas for organization to help myself frame this massively complicated book, because the marriage one was just insanely complicated. The topic is so complex. But I used some similar ideas of coming up with not just a chapter structure, but headings within the chapter before I wrote a word, and it was really quite helpful. So I think I'm going to write nothing but dummies books from now on. That's all I'm going to do. There's always an audience for dummies books.
Oh, absolutely, and it's just an endless list of possibilities of subjects for dummies books. So that's great. It's great. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's definitely on my read list. I love the dummies books. I'm always checking them out for something.
Yeah, I do too. Gardening for Dummies or whatever it is. It's really funny. Some Amazon reviewer gave it 1 star and said, I'm insulted by the whole dummies series. I'm not a dummy. And I thought, oh, lighten up. It's the whole idea is, and they made this clear from the beginning, you're not really writing for dummies. You're writing for somebody who doesn't know much about a particular topic and would like to, and has a sense of humor. So.
Right. Well, and they tend to break it down and make it as easy to digest and easy to understand as possible. Rather than being all tech speak or complicated. So I think it's a great system. Whoever came up with the idea is brilliant. Honestly. All right.
Okay. I'm just going to look at the just to let everyone know there's 10 minutes left, so if you want to get your questions in quickly, now's the time. So I'll let you carry on there, Sheila.
Okay. I think I might have come to the end of my list of questions, to be honest. I know, right? Well, we already have so much in common. It's hard for me to come up with questions that I might not already have an answer to. Out of everything that you've gotten to do, what would you say your favorite project has been?
Favorite in terms of just the joy of doing it would have had to been the dummies book. I really have not had so much fun on a project as that. But in terms of something I'm really proud of, I'd have to say it's the foundation. Creating that and seeing how it's taken off. One of the things I suspected from the beginning is that if you give people an opportunity to engage in compassionate work, they leap at it. They will really jump. And especially when you have a community of atheists who are used to being told how evil and corrupt they are, and then you give them an opportunity to really pour themselves into a positive expression, they just jump at it. And that's the response that people have really had. And I get the impression that it's here to stay, that this is an organization that's going to continue doing good long after I've moved on. So Dummies was the most fun, but Foundation was probably the most satisfying.
Fantastic. Marty, did you have anything else that you wanted?
No, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, probably, like I say, you had another book, Raising Freethinkers. Was that just an addendum to Parenting Beyond Belief?
Yeah, well, it's sort of a companion book. Parenting Beyond Belief was a collection of essays, all these different voices. For Raising Freethinkers, we wanted to get practical. So I had a smaller number of writers. There were just 4 of us on that book. And it's built around 100 common questions, kind of a Q&A situation for non-religious parenting. And then also activities and resources for parenting. So it's that's the practical companion to Parenting Beyond Belief that talks about, my 6-year-old is obsessed with death and very, fearful. How can I approach that? Or how can I give my kids a sense of community without going to the church? So it's a very different book, but it's kind of a hand in glove fit with the first one.
And there was something, this is going to jump back to where we were at the start, but there was one thing I did want to ask, and it's just come back to me. Like, one big conflict must be sex education. What's your kind of general advice? Kind of, if you're raising your kid in a secular manner, but they're getting abstinence in school, like how would you approach that kind of problem?
Yeah. Well, one of the great advantages we have as secular parents is that our approach to sex ed is pretty much identical to the current mainstream expert approach. So if you are able to get some of the resources of current mainstream, well thought of experts in sex ed, and get those resources in your kids' hands, that's the way to. Just consider it to be something the school has failed at. If they're doing abstinence-only education at this point, that is malpractice. It's social and educational malpractice to be doing that, because we know for a fact that it doesn't work. So at that point, you simply have to say, okay, here's a topic I'm essentially homeschooling on, that I'm going to have to find resources for my kids and have conversations that the school is failing to provide.
Okay, and it's just another. How do you actually, if you have to go to a school board, do you recommend any particular approach for that?
Funny you mentioned that, because I went to, the only time I've gone to our school board was over a sex ed question. Okay. And they were unhelpful. One of the things about school boards is that they are massively overburdened with issues. They've got a million things to deal with, building projects and tax levies and all this sort of thing, curriculum. And so if you try to get their attention about something that's important to you, that isn't on their front burner, they will do everything they can, in most cases, to mollify you and make you go away. So in our district, when they have new sex ed materials, they have a review period of 1 month where it's on display in this local library, and you can go and look at the materials and then give your input to the board before they approve the materials. So they did this a year and a half ago or something in our district, and had the most horrific counterproductive set of materials I have ever seen. It was absolutely obnoxious stuff. Basically all fearful, graphics, and, sex will kill you is the first thing they hear. You will die from sex. So don't do it. And a lot of just absolutely flat out false information. And I spent many, many hours pulling together a small report for the board, 4 pages, that showed that this material is filled with massive fraud and misinformation. I contacted the researchers on some of the studies that were cited in the thing to see if they were cited correctly. Cited this research from the Harvard Medical School. So I called him up. I said, is this correct? And he said, no, that's not correct. That's not what my research says. Put all this into the thing, gave it to the board. They voted to approve the materials anyway. They just completely ignored my input. So it is extremely difficult to get their attention. The one piece of advice I would give is, especially if you have like a religious incursion, kind of a question that religion is being shoved down the kids' throats. You want to draw the widest possible circle. You want to show that this is an issue of religious liberty for everyone, not just protecting atheists. If you go in and say, you're violating my rights as an atheist, you're not going to get any attention. But if you say there are kids in this school from many different perspectives of religion, and you are presenting just a Protestant Christian perspective, that will frequently get their attention. And in the United States, it's a constitution. You can point to a constitutional protection, and administrators will tend to be better educated about this than frequently the classroom teachers are. But you don't want to make it just about atheists. You want to draw the widest possible circle.
All right. So we've got 3 minutes left in the show now. So as always, we'll give our guests a little chance to soapbox if you want to promote any projects, or if people want to get more information on what you've spoken about, you're free to do so, Dale. Okay, sure. All of my books are available through Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk. And also you can go to parentingbeyondbelief.com for additional information about any of the parenting resources. If you're interested in joining Foundation Beyond Belief, and you are, the membership starts at $5 a month. It's a very reasonable thing. What I always suggest for people is choose a level that you won't notice. Start with a level that you won't even notice coming out of your account every month. And then once you've done that for 6 months or so, if you're able to bump it up, that's fine. But it's really a fantastic way to engage in this collective experiment for non-theists contributing to the compassionate betterment of the world. We have about 1,600 members right now, 1,620 members. We would really love to break through 2,000 in the coming months. So if you can go to foundationbeyondbelief.org and click on contribute or become a member, that would be terrific. Okay, I'll go around my co-hosts, and Sheila, your final thoughts here.
I want to thank Dale for appearing and giving me a chance to talk to you. It's been fantastic.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks.
I guess, and to plug myself, in addition to being here, I'm also on A News. So make sure you tune in every week. It's a lot of inappropriate humor mixed with current secular and atheist news, I suppose. You can also find me on Facebook or Twitter. Just do a search for me. Send me a message. I'll talk to anyone. I don't care. All right. And Marty.
Yeah, every now and then we have a guest that I have really nothing to say to. So this was one of those cases. But it was interesting to listen to anyway. So thanks a lot for being here.
Yep. Absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay. And so everyone, a big thank you to Dale. Thumbs up in all the chat rooms. Thank you very much for coming along, Dale. And again, sorry that we had to postpone at such short notice the last time.
No, not at all. I appreciate the invitation very much.
Okay, and just to let everyone know, this show is going to be uploaded to YouTube and iTunes. All the links are just down below if you're watching us on Vaughan. If you're watching on the website, the links are all around you. And we're back same time next week. Our guest is, and again, I hope I don't mispronounce his name, it's David Maller. He's just written a book about his journey from fundamentalist Pentecostalist to an agnostic, and he's just released I can't remember the name of the book, so sorry, David, if you're listening. But that's who our guest is next week. And like I say, if you've got any further questions for us, contact@trollingwithlogic.com. And like I say, if it's a question for Dale, I'm sure we can forward it on. He'll be happy to take any further questions. So thank you all very much, and we hope you have a good weekend wherever you are. So good night, everyone.
Bye.